Chapter 9. Medea, paralyzed in horror, watched the column of bubbling magma in the center of the lake. More and more magma was pouring from below. There was a soft rumbling beneath it all, never letting her forget. It was rising. Still rising. No wait out. I'm going to die. Back and forth, around and around, her mind played back the last hour. We should never have come here. Not wanting to endanger their lives, but at the same time, knowing people needed their help, wanting to be a hero. If we had come yesterday, if we had been faster exploring the town, if these people weren't so stubborn, if I had just listened to my gut, if I hadn't let Chesney talk me into coming here. Why didn't I say no? Because I promised, everywhere he went, I would follow. But right at this moment, none of that mattered. She could not handle this. It was too much. Too soon. Where would he lead her next?
You promised me, Chesney. You promised me this wouldn't happen.
She didn't have the strength anymore for shouting. She already felt half dead. She knew it was unfair, that she was being cruel. There was no way to know this would happen, right then. Everything seemed to point to the situation being relatively stable. And yet, in hindsight, it seemed so obvious. There was a war inside her. Now, she should apologize. She should stand and look for a solution. She should care. But all she could do was be afraid, and replay, again, the events of the last hour. I'm going to die. Without even really thinking, she just turned her head and watched Chesney, who stood beside her. He was so pale, even in this heat. He looked so small. He, too, stared into the magma lake, his eyes, staring, unblinking, into the approaching death. The look on his face was... He whispered,
You're right. I did promise.
He grabbed her arm and made to pull her to her feet.
Come with me, please, Medea.
She did not resist, but she could only dumbly follow him like a zombie. He led her back into the pub, and brought her to a seat right at the bar.
Sit. Here. I'll be right back.
She didn't really notice what was going on anymore. She just sat, dumbly, watching the bartender polish his glass. Rub, 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 He put it down.
It rose again.
Did she even nod? There was shouting, and arguing, and smashing of glasses, somewhere.
Here, take this. It's on the house.
A drink was put in front of her. Did she drink it? The level seemed lower. It was sweet, right? More shouting. More crashing. Discordant notes. A chair moved next to her, and Chesney sat in it. His hands were balled into fists into his hair, like he wanted to tear it out. His eyes ablaze with emotion. She wanted to speak. Nothing came.
Yep. Piano Man's as stubborn as these folk here. Came from Jerain on a simple little trip, and right after he got into town, whole lower level flooded. Path to Jerain, gone just like that. I suspect he misses it something fierce, to be going on like he is.
Another drink. It was bubbly and orange. And one for Chesney, too. Bubbly and dark.
It's dry. You should stay hydrated.
The glass was picked back up. Rub, 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 rub. Rub, rub. Noises beside her. Chesney was talking, looking beside him, but not to her. The other seat. The empty seat. His glass emptied. Her glass emptied. She blinked, and they were outside the bar, back in the heat, but it was like it was happening to someone else entirely, and she did not feel it.
Medea, I promise. I will fix this. I promise.
Fine, Ape. Let's go. But we need to leave before we get trapped here, okay? Promise me, Chesney.
I know. I just need a minute to think. And you should lay down. It's okay. It will be okay.
Had she said it out loud? A sour smell. A hard bed. Pacing. More hushed conversation. He was not talking to her, she could tell, but there was no one else in the room. So much time passed, but she did not notice. Back and forth. Arguing. Back and forth. I can't keep laying down like this. I need to move. I need to help. But it was like her body was a puppet with all its strings cut. What can we do? There has to be something. Something we are missing. Think. But all she could think about was the rising magma. The words she said and didn't say. The look in Chesney's eyes. The people of the town. The mayor's plea. Mash's desperate desire to hear his son's favorite song. The mad despair of the piano player. The poor dancers from Jurain, stuck in an unfair situation. Wait, the dancers. From Jurain? The piano player was from Jurain too, right? He had been stuck, just like the sisters had. Maybe. Maybe. She sat bolt upright.
Chesney!
He stopped mid-pace and froze. There was a strange mix of guilt, shame, and fear in his expression, like she had just caught him with his hand in the cookie jar. She didn't have time for whatever this was. She had to focus.
Chesney, the dancers.
For a second, his expression was simply confusion. Then, something seemed to click, and his eyes shot open wide. They locked with hers.
You're right. Maybe they can convince him.
His almost manic elation quickly sobered.
But it's such a long shot. Do we have any other option?
She asked, hoping the desperation in her own voice wasn't coming back. She had fallen pretty far into a pit, back there. She'd never shut down like that before. If Chesney hadn't picked her up and led her along, she would still be collapsed on that ledge and spinning wheels in her own mind until the magma had come. I have to focus on the now, on moving forward. I have to believe we can survive. And, honestly, she was a little scared for Chesney. Had she said something to him? He seemed pretty close to unraveling as well. Thinking about what might have happened if she hadn't recovered from her fugue state sent a chill down her spine. We both need a lot of hope right now. Together, the pair left the tiny room the inn proprietor had given to them while Midia was barely conscious, and rapped on the door to the dancers.
Hi, it's us again. Can we come in?
Midia asked.
Please do.
A voice called from within, and they opened the door. Not much had changed since they were here a little while ago, but the new, more worried look on the caretaker told Midia that she must have suspected what had just happened.
That noise. Did the magma rise again?
Chesney and Midia exchanged a look.
Yes, the last exit is blocked now.
The woman's tired, bruised eyes closed in anguish, and a fresh tear fell down her cheek.
It's too late, then.
Midia sat beside her.
Please don't lose hope yet. There's still something to be done. And I think you can help.
She tried so hard to hide the fear and desperation in her voice, trying to stoke that tiny spark of insight into a small flame of hope. The woman gave her a quizzical look.
How could I help? What do you mean? Well, first, why don't we properly introduce ourselves? My name is Midia, and I'm a spiritualist from Ratzurk. My friend here is Chesney, a spiritualist that was recently training at the School of Magic east of here. May I ask your names?
The caretaker answered.
My name is Janine, and my sister.
The shivering form on the bed interrupted.
And I'm Danette. It's good to meet you both, though I wish it was under better circumstances. Now, to explain what I think we can do. We know of a way to stop the magma, but through a very frustrating and complicated series of events. The person who can do it refuses to, and the person who could maybe convince him to also refuses to.
The shocked and appalled looks both Janine and Danette gave her told her all she needed to know about their thoughts on the matter.
I know, it's ridiculous. Chesney, Don't recall really well, but did you talk to them when we went back in the bar?
A bit of color rose in Chesney's cheeks.
Well, talk to might be a polite word for it, but yeah. They still refused to budge.
Medea nodded.
I thought so. Well, the piano player in the bar refuses to play anything but this insanely happy song, and I think he is just incredibly homesick for Geraint. Since you two were also from Geraint, I was hoping there might be a way to calm him down, remind him of home, and get him to play a tribute to the mine foreman's dead son.
Donette, the girl shivering and moaning in the bed, quipped.
So, the lives of everyone in this tea town rests on a crazy piano player and a couple of busted-up dancers.
She even managed a smirk. Chesney sighed and scratched his head.
That's about the size of it. Yeah.
Janine thought for a moment.
You know, at this point, I'm willing to do anything. And I think I know what could help, but I would need my sister.
Donette coughed, then cringed in pain.
Just let me put on my dancing shoes.
The three of them stood in silence, letting the impossibility of the situation settle in. Cautiously, Janine stood and wrung her hands with the cloth she had been using to wipe the sweat from Donette's brow.
I might know what we can do. Before he evacuated, the doctor here in Hagudo came by and told us that the remedy for her illness was actually something that could be found locally. Down in the well behind the inn, there's apparently a glowing scale that grows on the cave wall. Apparently it's quite dangerous down there, though, and filled with monsters. Before he could find anyone willing to go down there, the magma worsened, and he was forced to evacuate as well.
Some doctor, abandoning his patient, Medea growled in her thought. At the revelation of a cure, Chesney brightened considerably.
Monsters are our specialty. Right, Medea.
She had some mixed feelings rushing into this kind of danger headlong, but she couldn't bear to spoil the hope in his face as he said it. They needed every ounce they could find, even if she had to go down into a dark, creepy well filled with monsters. She also refused to acknowledge the mountain of ifs, buts, and maybes that this plan hinged on. This had to succeed. She smiled her brightest smile, knowing how fake it felt but not caring.
That's right, Chesney. We've got this.
Janine wasn't convinced, though.
I hate to say this, but aren't you two just kids? This isn't a game. The monsters down the well are apparently quite nasty.
Chesney's expression immediately cooled.
If you had seen what we had to deal with yesterday, you would not be worried. Besides, are you seriously going to try and stop us from going, even with things as they are?
Janine's eyes lowered to her sister on the bed.
No, I suppose not.
That wasn't fair, Chesney. She was just worried, she thought. She knew she couldn't point fingers, though. Everyone was under a lot of pressure right now.
Trust us, you two. We'll be back as soon as possible,
Medea said, giving her most reassuring smile, before turning to Chesney and signaling they should go. Finally, with a purpose, they didn't even feel the heat of the boiling magma lake as they left the inn and found the well behind it. It was large, oddly square, and made of bright cyan bricks. Steam was slowly rising from within. Chesney peered over the edge.
I don't think dark, creepy holes are allowed to look this cheerful.
Medea put her hand in the slowly rising steam.
Do I have to add getting steamed to death to my list of very reasonable fears while we are down there?
Chesney grabbed the chain that descended into the darkness below, hopped over the edge, and started to carefully climb down.
I'm going first. Don't argue. I promised I'd see you through this, and I will.
Guilt washed over her. She must have said something earlier.
Chesney, if I said something before.
Almost too quickly, he replied.
It's fine.
It's not fine. But this isn't exactly the time, either. Or maybe it is. What if these are the last moments we have? He lowered far enough she couldn't see him anymore.
Everything okay?
After a moment, a reply.
Yeah. Come on down. It's safe. I don't think safe is on the same map as us right now, but I get you. I'll be right down.
She grabbed the chain and held on with all her strength. She tried to put her feet against the wall of the well, but she was clumsy and ended up sliding down a lot of the way. It made her hands smart, but she'd live.
That was tougher than it looked,
she said, shaking her hands to dull the pain. Under the well was nothing like she expected. The space was cavernous and open. Just behind them was a cliff overlooking a dark abyss. She could see no other wall or bottom. The ground at her feet was moist, and that was where the steam was rising from. Nearby was another pool of magma. She guessed it was a recent addition. This must have boiled all the water away.
I don't suppose there's any of this glowing scale stuff right here?
She asked, looking around. Chesney had been looking around since she got down there.
Actually, if you squint and hold your hand up to block the light from the magma pool, it looks like there's some kind of light coming from way over there.
She did as he suggested, and sure enough, there was a pale blue glow, barely visible through the steam, way on the other side of the new magma pool.
Thank the immortals. I was worried we would have to go through dozens of tunnels to find it.
Wordlessly, they unsheathed their weapons and slowly started to make their way around. The glow of the magma was barely enough light to see by. As they walked, Medea decided she had to speak up, or she would end up putting it off until it just never came. Her years as the protectress of the village had molded her to tackle problems head-on, and she wasn't going to stop that now.
Chesney, about what I said earlier. I know you said it's fine, but it's really not. We both know you put a lot of pressure on yourself, and I just made it worse. That's not why I came with you, so just let me apologize. Well, thank you, but really, it is okay. I know you weren't in your right mind just then.
And then there was the thing she really didn't know how to talk about.
Say, Chesney, when I was out of it, it seemed like you were talking to someone.
1 heartbeat. 2.
Yeah. I was talking to the piano guy, and Smash.
So, that's how it's going to be, is it?
Chesney. After that, at the bar, and in our room.
No response. Medea sighed.
And on the rope?
Chesney looked down.
It's, nothing. It's not a problem.
Time for the big guns, then.
Chesney, what was our first rule? Please, just talk to me.
He sighed.
Fine, Errol. Sometimes I just get distracted, I guess. Ugh, this is hard. I want to try to describe this to you without you freaking out, but I can't quite find the words.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
And even though it sounds like I should freak out about it, I shouldn't. Well, when you say it like that.
Chesney laughed.
But yeah, I guess there really isn't a good way to say this. But it all started after I was exiled, I guess, from the magic school. I had no idea what to do, or where to go, and I was still reeling from the shock of everyone being gone?
Medea offered.
Dead,
he said. Medea flinched. He continued.
It was all so overwhelming, and then it started. I started seeing things. Or maybe that's not even the right word. I would simply know things. I would just know that, just out of the corners of my eyes, outside my vision, behind me, all around me. They were staring, watching, everyone, watching me, the last survivor, the cause.
This is far more serious than I thought. Medea forced herself to keep an easy, safe tone.
Did they do anything? Or say anything? Yes. And no. At first, I wouldn't even let myself think about them. I ignored them. And then, usually, I wouldn't see them. But sometimes I would hear my friends when I desperately needed their advice. That's how I was able to keep moving. And that's when I learned that if I just kept moving forward, I wouldn't have to stop and remember. And how is it now? It's hard to say. Most of the time, it's fine. Like, I'm fine. But other times it can blindside me. Like on the rope. And when I get really stressed out. Like, just earlier. Right?
His eyes looked really tired all of a sudden.
Yeah. What were they doing, or saying? Let's just say it had its ups and downs.
He turned to look into the darkness beyond the cliff to their left.
Hey, what's this thing?
Barely lit by the light of the magma, a rope bridge could be seen attached to this side of the chasm, stretching out into the darkness beyond. It was old but seemed sturdy enough, with no obvious defect. Medea got close to the edge and tried to peer to the other side.
I wonder where it goes. Who knows? There's probably weird stuff like this all over the place down here. I'm just thankful that the magma doesn't seem to flowing here quite as fast as in the town.
That's right. I wonder why that is. Could there be other ways out of here? She thought, desperate for any possible lifeline. But they were on a mission, and that came first. The glowing scale was not far off now. The boiling, drying effects of the nearby magma pool did not reach this far into the well. The ground here was damp and squishy under their boots, and lichens grew on wet rocks and other unknown things. Here and there, small insects or other small vermin would dart away from them when they approached. The smell was rotten, thick with cloying decay, and she tried not to think about the little crunches and pops of her boots on unseen things as she marched towards the glowing scale. She wrapped her arms around herself.
Ugh, this place is so creepy. What? Huh? You don't like the date spot I picked out?
Chesney laughed sheepishly. Immediately she barked out a laugh, but then she suddenly felt hot in the cheeks. Wait, did he say date? And no way. He probably just said that as part of the joke. I really should not look too deep into that. Presently, they found themselves in front of the cave wall, where the serene blue glow was coming from. The area around the glowing scale was overgrown with oozing, droopy weeds from the dark cave ceiling, and thick, pulsing lichens. The wall was a cobweb of plants, fungi, crawling things, and shadows. And there, tantalizingly within reach, was the simple blue light of a glowing patch on the wall, surrounded by all. The scale was amazingly smooth, seemed like it had formed over time from some natural process of leaching minerals from the rock, and maybe in interaction with some fungi or lichen that grew down here. Medea laughed nervously.
After you, Chesney.
He rolled his eyes.
Yeah, saw that one coming from the next town over.
He knelt down and started trying to pry the scale from the wall with his fingers.
This is stuck on really good. I might need my dagger.
While he worked, she stood back and watched and tried not to think about how unsettling this part of the caverns was. Behind her, she heard something like a quiet tick, or plop behind her. She turned to look, but saw nothing unexpected.
Did you hear that? No, I'm kind of focused here. This thing is really stuck on.
A moment later, another plop, and another.
Come on, you had to have heard that. This time, Chesney.
He turned to look at her, a slightly grumpy expression on his face.
No, I still don't hear anything. And this is so gross. I keep feeling like my hands are going to be covered in slimy gunk forever. Wait, what's that on your leg?
Her eyes instantly snapped down to her leg. There, just barely lit by the light of the magma, was some kind of pale bump. Confused, she turned her leg, and threw into contrast some kind of hideous leech that had attached itself to her leg. She practically leapt out of her skin and shrieked in terror, whacking and brushing her leg to get the thing to dislodge.
Gross, 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 gross.
At the sound of her shriek, though, an answering sound came, a deep, throaty ribbit that turned into a squeal. Two great slimy purple creatures crawled out of two shadows on either side of the cave wall, right next to Chesney. They had 4 limbs and crawled on their bellies. They looked to be almost the same size as the teens. Smooth, slimy skin, wide fat heads with black soulless eyes, and a long thick tail. One opened its mouth to ribbit squeal again, revealing dozens of needle-like fangs. In an instant, they both leapt onto him. Their great wide mouths engulfed his arms, and though he cried out in pain, the armor of his arms blocked the worst of it. He panicked and fell over, screaming and kicking at one of them, thrashing to get them to release his arms. If I blast it with lightning, will it travel through the creature's body and hurt Chesney? Unable to take that risk, Midia readied her knife, and dove towards the creature that Chesney was kicking at. She shuddered as the blade jammed into the side of the creature, feeling it knock against bone, and carve into flesh. Her hands were instantly slippery with slime and dark blood. Rather than release, the creature redoubled its effort to crush through Chesney's armor and pierce his flesh with its needle fangs. He cried out, and growled in anger, but he could barely move, caught between the fierce holds of both the slimy creatures. In response, she began to stab it, over and over again with quick, shallow stabs until finally it let go. At that moment, with the hateful creature hissing with its mouth gaped open right at her, she knew she was in trouble. Oh no, I didn't think this through. Somehow with even more ferocity, it leapt straight at her face.
Midia! No! Damn it! Get off me!
Chesney shouted, finally able to pull out his own dagger and tear into the last remaining creature holding down his other arm. A terrible cold feeling gripped her as she instinctually dove back and guarded her face with her arm, and dozens of needle-sharp fangs punctured her flesh with crushing pressure. Unable to withstand the pain, she cried out and shook with shock and adrenaline. Quickly, the feeling disappeared with a strange cold numbness. The creature released, then bit down again, and shook its head back and forth. The cold feeling began to crawl up her arm. Midia screamed in rage, then used her free arm to drive a strong bolt of lightning right at the creature's eye. Finally repulsed, it let go and quickly crawled away, temporarily, to recover from the shock. I need to. She knew she had to do something, but her limbs were turning to ice, and her mind was fogging up. It was getting so hard to breathe. She just needed to get away. She needed to just get somewhere she could breathe and think. Something was dripping from her mouth. She ignored it and flopped onto her stomach. She had to crawl, had to get away. She didn't care, or even notice, what she was crawling through. The only direction was away. But her arms were so tired, and wouldn't listen. Wriggling things. On her arms. On her legs. The ground was moving, an undulating ocean of small, pale, slimy mouths. No. No, please. I just need to. This was all wrong. There was more to her than this. She knew there was something about this she knew how to fix, but she couldn't think. Though she could barely move, she turned around just enough to see Chesney. He was looking frantic, staring at her, while dodging between the snapping jaws and tails of the slimy creatures, and bursts of flame to deal with the leeches that were falling down from the ceiling. He was shouting at her, but she could not tell what. Something? Do something. Right there in her mind's eye, she could feel strangely clearly, Earth and Sphere, waiting for her. She stretched out her hand, felt something move within her. Here, Chesney. And then all was quiet.
Yeah.
The blanket of darkness that she had no idea was there suddenly lifted. The world was blurry, and she ached all over. 5 more minutes, Dad.
Midia! Don't go back to sleep. Come on, stay with me. You have to wake up, please.
Wait, that's not Dad. Chesney, what's he doing in my room? Like a bucket of water, the events of the past returned to her, and she sat up straight and gasped to fill her burning lungs. It didn't matter that the air was hot, moist, and stifling. It was the sweetest air she'd ever tasted, and she needed more. Her mouth was full of something, and she coughed over and over to clear it out. She blinked until the fog of unconsciousness and the grime that caked her face was gone to behold her surroundings. First, her body. Though the wounds were closing, her arm was a mess. Dozens of puncture wounds, scratches, gouges, and her flesh was recovering from the diseased dark purple color. And as for the rest of her, though quickly disappearing, all over her skin were little slimy trails, and circular red splotches, and a few burns and sooty marks.
"Oh, thank Gabnid,"
Chesney said, collapsing onto his back and covering his face.
"That was horrifying."
She looked around. The soft, slimy structures and flora that had previously taken over the place by this side of the well cavern was now completely gone. Everything was burnt away. There, by the wall, the two slimy wide-mouthed creatures were dead, torn open and smoking. The ground was littered with crackling, oily shapes, and Chesney was drenched in blood and slime from head to toe.
"What happened?" "The last thing I remember, you were being attacked by those things, and when I tried to get one off of you, it turned on me. It's all hazy after that."
He sat back up and looked her in the eyes. He looked absolutely harrowed.
"Are you sure you're okay?"
She winced as she tried to move and adjust to face him properly.
"I'm really sore, but, yeah."
Chesney sighed in relief, and collapsed back onto his back, seemingly deflating from exhaustion, or maybe something else.
"Those two things completely surprised me. I couldn't think. All my mind could comprehend was away. And when one of them let me go, I completely focused on attacking the other one to let me go. It seemed like the blink of an eye, but then I'm standing, and I see you and you're covered in blood. And leeches are all over you. Your skin is turning purple, and you're foaming at the mouth, and I can't get to you."
His voice caught in his throat.
"I can barely handle the two things trying to grab me again. And then the leeches were just everywhere. But all I could see, all I could think about was how you were, dying in front of me, and I couldn't do anything."
She looked at her arm again. "I was dying?" He shook his head. In denial? In disbelief? In shame? Relief? She couldn't say, but the look in his eyes made her think he was scared beyond what he could deal with.
Are you okay, Chesney?"
she asked, knowing how stupid a question it was, but knowing she needed to ask it. He laughed. A strange, quiet hiccup of a laugh.
"And then, with your last ounce of strength, you gave me your speed. And then you were gone. I lost it, Midia. I blacked out. All this?"
He waved about.
"I have no idea how I did all this. But when I came to, I was swatting and burning leeches off of your body, crying. I rolled you over. Your eyes were so cloudy and lifeless. Even in this heat, you were so cold, and the foam wouldn't stop coming out of your mouth. The pool of blood just kept getting bigger. I scrambled. I shoved so many damn pills in your mouth, but it didn't seem to matter. You would look better for a second, but then get so much worse."
He pulled out a bottle of pills.
"I tore through our bags, dumped them out, looking for anything. And that's when I saw it. Anticetamol. It had never come up, and I completely forgot I even had it. Poisonous and venomous effects. And sure enough, a few seconds after I gave you one, the color in you began to return to normal."
"Oh, sweet so's light. I was poisoned. That's what happened to me. It seems so obvious now. Why didn't I see it before?" He teared up, looking at the bottle.
"What if I didn't have this? I just found it. Randomly, out in the damn woods. I almost led you to your death. Again."
Immense guilt pressed her down. We never needed that in the first place. She thought. She pulled her knees close to her chest.
"Chesney, no. Don't. Don't feel guilty about this, please." "Why not? We both know it's true. I led you into Hagudo when you didn't want to go. I led you further on in, when it was obvious the people here wouldn't leave. I led you into this well." Chesney Stop it. Without even knowing what we would face, and you almost died because I wasn't prepared. Saved by complete freak accident.
Medea teared up, pulling her legs tight.
No, Chesney, you don't understand. What? Why? What am I missing?
The guilt of everything was piling up on top of her, and she couldn't stop from exploding. Maybe it was fear, or adrenaline, or just the stress of the last few days, but she couldn't stop it.
Because it was my own damn fault. Chesney, you think I didn't know? That going here was a bad idea. Of course I did. But I couldn't let go of the feeling of wanting to be a stupid hero, and save people. You think I didn't know deep down that nothing we did could help them, and I was just stroking my own ego? And then, I blamed you, when it all fell apart. I was a coward, and left you to pick up the pieces. I even made you go and pry the glowing scale from the wall, and I didn't even watch your back, and we were ambushed. But worst of all, I was just an idiot, okay? I was too stupid to remember that my own magic can cure poison. Chesney. That's right. I could have saved myself immediately and helped you. But I just ran like a stupid, scared little kid. I just froze up and nearly got myself killed and dumped everything on you. Again.
She couldn't get enough air between her yelling and the shaking of her body from letting it all out. But there was still more. The secret shame she'd been carrying since they left Retzerk, she didn't dare think about, but she could always feel it in the shadows of her mind.
And I told you to rely on me, that I would be here for you, that you didn't have to do this alone. I even made you promise to not just shoulder everything and let me help, but all I keep doing is failing, and relying on you.
Why am I still so weak? After everything I've given up, after setting aside everything I wanted, to become strong, I'm nothing.
I'm so sorry, Chesney. I'm just weighing you down.
They sat together in stunned silence. Chesney was shocked by the outburst. Medea was shocked. She finally gave voice to one of her biggest fears. It felt so alien to show weakness, to let out her true feelings. Ever since she had to stop being a little girl and start protecting everyone, it was like a switch had flipped, and she just knew that she could never share those feelings, not even with herself. But now, saying them out loud, it scared her. Had she made a mistake, thinking she was strong enough to truly protect someone? Was she only just barely good enough to protect a tiny backwater town from the occasional monster? Gently, Chesney moved next to her and sat beside her.
I feel like the pot calling the kettle black here, but Medea, are you okay?
I have to be stronger than this. I have to be someone Chesney can rely on. She took 3 deep breaths. Okay, Medea thought, just like always. You are a rock. Rocks do not feel. You are the last defense. To fail is to die. You must win. Protect them all. She stood and held firmly upright. Her body screamed in pain, but she did not allow herself to express it.
Yes, I promise. I will not fail you again, Chesney.
He scrambled to his feet, holding out his hands cautiously, waiting to catch her if she buckled.
Whoa, take it easy. You only just woke up, and I don't recall, ever, saying you failed me, Medea. That's just so wrong. I don't even know how to start with that.
She hated seeing the concern in his eyes. Every wrinkle of worry was like a reminder of her failures.
Chesney, look. I know we have both made mistakes, but I joined this mission to support you, and it shames me to know that I have failed to do that over and over.
He looked at her like she was crazy.
Are you seriously going to just gloss over all the times you saved my life? How you're always watching out for me? I haven't forgotten. But I also haven't forgotten burning you, the Kong, or Denebra Mountain, and my breakdown, and this.
She gestured to the fire-torn surroundings.
I will be stronger. I swear it. I won't slow you down anymore. Medea. Enough. We don't have time now.
she shouted, much louder than she wanted to.
Now, give me your hands, Chesney.
Reluctantly, he did. He did not look happy.
We will talk more later. Okay.
She closed her eyes, and felt again for the healing force she could feel now, always welling up in the back of her mind. That place of love, and compassion, and warmth. She scooped up great handfuls, and stalwartly carried them to the boundary between them, and poured it into him. He sighed, relieved. With her eyes closed, she could almost hear his body knit itself back together. He must have been in so much pain. I'm so sorry, Chesney.
Thank you. Really. And I don't care what you say about this, but I'm sorry for not being brave enough to admit when I'm wrong, for breaking my promise. I will be a better leader. Something like this won't happen again. You don't need to apologize, but come on, let's hurry. Do you have the scale?
He nodded, but didn't move.
Yes, but we're not going anywhere until you heal yourself too.
A self-hating, petty part of herself had wanted her to feel the pain of this, to wallow in it as punishment for everything that she blamed herself for. But the rational part of her brain knew that she was less effective if she wasn't at her best. And from now on, that's all she would be.
Right, of course.
She again delved deep into herself, and allowed the warmth of life to pour into her, to fill the holes in her body, the wounds in her soul. The pain ebbed away to a whisper in the dark.
Now, let's hurry.
They did not waste any more time. Knowing the way now, they ran back towards the chain. They both stood in the shaft of dark red light from above, wondering what they would see when they got out. There was a staring contest where they both seemed to want the other to go and escape the potential danger of the well first. Not wanting to be any more of a burden, Medea acquiesced and began her climb. The healing energy and medicine had softened the edge of the pain of her wounds, but did not erase them completely. Her arm exploded in agony at having to hold her full weight, and she could not stop the moisture welling up in the corner of her eye. You are a rock. Rocks do not feel. She grit her teeth, and reached up again, and pulled. Reach, and pull. Her arm was so weak, she had to strain twice as hard just to gain a little height. A voice echoed from below.
Medea, come down. You're too hurt. I'll go up first. You tie the chain to your waist, and I'll pull you up.
To fail is to die.
No, I'm fine.
She managed to gasp out. A non-committal noise from below, almost too quiet for her to hear. He mumbled,
He's so stubborn.
Pushing the pain away, she forced and strained and pulled until, at last, her shaking arm could grab the edge of the well, and she pulled herself over the edge. The hot air was no longer merely dangerous. It was deadly. The intense heat was almost like she was touching a hot-cooked pan all over her body. She scrambled to wrap herself in her cloak, only allowing a small hole with which to see through. And there it was. The magma lake had quickly risen more since they had descended, and it had already engulfed the second tier of Hagudo. The stairs down were gone. A lake of magma filled the gap between the inn and the pub on the other side of the third tier. A few feet more and the magma would spill over and fill the last tier. You must win. Protect them all.
Chesney, hurry. There's no time.
She cried down. Using more of her precious life, she again called upon earth and sphere, and filled her hands with their power.
I'll speed you up. I'm coming. And don't use that willy-nilly. You were almost dead a few minutes ago. Is it bad? Very bad.
With renewed speed and no further protest, Chesney quickly scrambled up the chain and over the side of the well. As soon as he did, he growled in pain, and covered his skin with his traveling cloak.
This is unbearable. And now we're trapped, too. What do we even do now?
She grabbed him by the hem of his cloak and dragged him into the inn.
I already thought of that. We give her the medicine, and we take them both down the well. There was that bridge, remember? It must go somewhere. It's all we can do. You're right. Good thinking. Medea.
The time for politeness long past. They barged into the room, startling Janine as she hunched over her sister. Her eyes were red, and her skin was pale. She was terrified.
Oh my goodness, you surprised me. I'm so glad you're safe. With the lake how it was, I feared the worst.
Chesney fished the scale out of his pocket.
You're right, it was tough, but we have the scale.
Janine's expression changed to a mix of awe and hope.
Oh, you found it. You found it.
Gently, she took it from Chesney's hand and rushed to her sister's side.
Oh, please, this has to work.
She placed the glowing scale on Danette's forehead. As soon as they touched, Danette gasped in relief. It seemed as though some of the color of the scale leached into her skin and passed into her body. Her pale skin tightened and bulged with thin blue veins. Then the blue faded away, the swelling dissipated, and a healthy rose color settled into her skin. She sat up abruptly.
Holy! That stuff sure has a kick. I feel like my sinuses are so clear I could shove my whole hand in there.
Caught between laughing and crying, her sister Janine lunged at her and embraced her.
Sister, don't be so gross. But oh, thank the immortals you're safe again.
Danette whispered, her eyes wet.
Thanks for not giving up on me, you foolish girl. All right, you two. Here's the situation. Magma Lake has risen to the point where we can't leave. As such, we will escort you down into the well. There seems to be another passage, and hopefully, that will lead out of here.
The two girls shared firm nods, and stood.
Ugh, I need like a dozen baths,
Danette said.
Just glad to be out of that bed. Maybe 24,
Janine joked, smirking. Miggy grabbed sheets from the bed.
Here, you'll need them a moment longer.
She tried not to cringe at holding the damp, filthy things.
The heat out there is absolutely deadly. Just wear it around you until you get in the well.
They all rushed outside, around the building, and into the well. Chesney went down first, then Janine, Danette, and lastly, Medea. She pointedly did not look at the magma lake. She did not want to know how many feet were left between the lake of magma and the lip of the well.
Oh my, this place is huge,
Janine remarked, looking at the size of the cavern they found themselves in.
And it's occupied, so stay close,
Chesney remarked, scanning the shadows. They began to walk towards the bridge that led into the darkness, and hopefully, safety.
So, were the creatures down here really bad?
Danette asked, shivering despite the heat.
Well, let's just say.
Medea and Chesney both caught themselves talking at the same time, and exchanged a look. Finally, Chesney closed his eyes, remembering, and said,
It was awful. I'll leave it at that.
Danette looked down and rubbed her shoulders.
I really can't thank you both enough. I feel like if you hadn't come along, my sister may have tried to do it herself out of desperation.
Medea said softly,
Then, it's a very good thing we came along.
The two sisters shared another teary hug as they walked. Standing again at the bridge, it still looked rather sturdy. Chesney again went first into the darkness, then called out from the other side, and summoned a small flame to light their way across. Then went Janine, Danette, and lastly Medea. After crossing the gap, they were confronted with two choices for paths.
Which way now?
Janine asked.
Not sure,
Medea answered.
We never went this far. What do you think, Chesney?
He was silent for a time, eyes closed, contemplating. At last, he perked up and asked,
Does anyone else hear that?
They all stood there in the dark and quiet of the cave. There, on the edge of hearing, a tune, coming from the left, and it sounded so familiar, though she couldn't place it at first.
Is that?
He nodded.
The piano player. Come on, maybe there's a way over there after all.
With Chesney in the lead with a guiding flame, and Medea guarding the rear, they ran in the direction of the sound. It was getting louder and more clear. Finally, they stood under something that looked like a maintenance ladder leading up to some kind of hatch. At the bottom was a pile of garbage, swarming with flies and other vermin.
Our journeys always seem to lead us to the most interesting places, dear sister,
Danette said, plugging her nose.
Humph. You say that like I'm the one always leading us into these interesting places.
Without even being asked, Chesney grabbed a rung and hauled himself up to the hatch and pushed it open. As soon as he did, manic piano playing filled the cavern.
What are you kids doing in my garbage chute?
Came the familiar voice of the bartender.
Special delivery,
Chesney remarked, chuckling to himself. Medea smiled to herself. It's nice to see him laugh for a change. They wasted no time climbing out of the cavern and into the bar. The scene was just as grim, and smelled even worse, than the last time they'd been in here. Smash looked up from his drunken stupor to see them. It may have been her imagination, but she could have sworn she saw a small amount of relief on his face, twinged with sadness. Then he laid down again. The two dancers cringed at the scene. It was not the most welcoming of environment.
There's the piano player,
Medea said, gesturing to the animated laugh-free man at the keyboard.
If you can convince him to play Gotham Lullaby, we might just make it out of here after all.
The two sisters looked at him, and then at each other, and grinned.
Oh yeah, we've got this. Right, sis?
Danette asked.
Works every time, doesn't it?
Janine smiled. They spent a moment cleaning themselves up a bit, then energetically pounced over to the piano. With sultry movements, they leaned on either side and tilted their heads, letting their beautiful long red hair cascade over their shoulders.
Well, well, what do we have here, dear sister? Somebody seems ready to party.
The fingers of the piano player faltered and his face grew red. He tried to speak, but nothing coherent could come out.
Well, we heard you were a little homesick for Jerain, so we thought, why don't we show you a special little dance back from home,
Danette winked, and left her mouth open just a little bit. Like a cat on the prowl, Janine was right there on the other side, practically in his lap, whispering into his ear.
We just need one little, teeny-tiny favor after, okay? Do you promise?
Still completely unable to process speech, the man simply nodded slowly, like he was in a haze. His eyes were blind to everything but the dancers.
Good boy. Now, hit it.
Enthusiastically, the piano player started playing a jazzy, heart-pumping tune. Giggling together, the sisters skipped over to one of the tables, and grabbed a chair each, and plopped them down on the dance floor, straddling them, and swaying back and forth to the music.
What kind of dancers?
Chesney began, and looked towards Medea.
Are these?
Medea finished, reciprocating the look, realization slowly dawning. Both their cheeks turned flaming red in embarrassment, and looked anywhere they could except each other as the two dancers began to dance with torrid, sultry movements and gestures, brushing each other's skin, leading and pulling each other from one sexually charged dance move into another. The entire bar was wrapped in attention, except for Smash, who stayed half-dazed and laying down on his table, surrounded by empty glasses. The pair would at times part, to dance close to a patron, blow them a kiss, touch a shoulder, or wink. They paid special attention to the piano player, who miraculously managed to keep the tune consistent while he practically drooled all over himself when one sister would sit on his lap or kiss his cheek. In a flash, their clothes seemed to unfold or change subtly from moment to moment, and suddenly a plain skirt was a long, sheer veil, and jingling bangles appeared on their wrists and ankles, adding a whole new dimension to the performance. It was obvious to Medea that she was not the intended audience for this performance, but when she took herself away from the moment and allowed herself to watch from a purely analytical standpoint, she found their movement so fascinating. They were so strong, and graceful, and well-practiced, and they could make the viewer completely forget about the very real danger they were in with just a few gestures and sighs. At least in that one respect, she was envious. Surreptitiously, she glanced at Chesney, who was simply paralyzed. She didn't know why, but seeing him so enraptured made her want to punch him. Not that even she could look away. As if somehow the piano player had been in on the performance the whole time. The music built to a crescendo as the two sisters performed one final, especially tantalizing maneuver together that ended up with them gliding over to the piano player, embracing him from both sides, and with lips just barely touching his ears, whispering something quietly only to him. Then, they grinned, stood, and opened their arms to the bar, holding hands and panting.
Well, what did you think of the performance, everybody?
The entire bar erupted in fierce applause. There was hooting and howling, whistling and stomping. "It's a pack of wild dogs in here." The two dancers walked easily between the tables, saying their thanks, blowing kisses, and made their way to Chesney and Medea. Danette smirked, used her hand to gently close Chesney's mouth.
When you get a little older, come find us in Jerain for the real show. Danette, tut.
Janine reprimanded, but Danette simply giggled. Turning to Medea, she said,
Okay, I'm pretty sure he would agree to sign over his whole house right now, so you can go and ask him to play the song.
Finally, Chesney found his voice.
Wow.
Well, sort of.
He means to say, thank you. Isn't that right, Chesney?
She said with something between a smile and a grimace, elbowing her partner harshly right in the ribs to emphasize her point.
Ow. Yes, thank you both,
he stammered, still red-faced.
We'll, get right over there.
As they passed Smash's table, Medea couldn't help but notice the way Chesney's eyes changed when he thought no one would see. They went right back to that hollow hardness that he didn't seem to notice he was doing. Was his reaction just now all an act? It had seemed so genuine, it was hard to believe. But maybe. And more importantly, what would she even say if it was? I know he needs help, but what can I do? She thought, trying to understand what seemed to trigger these changes in him. Well, until I understand a little more, I'll just have to take on a stronger role in keeping us both safe, and make sure he doesn't take on too much on his own. If he won't look out for himself, I'll do it for him. They approached the piano player, who was still seemingly struck dumb by the experience. His face and long ears were flushed, and he wore the goofiest smile.
Feeling better?
Chesney asked, casually.
Whoa, I feel like $1,000,000, the
man said, giggling to himself.
I don't know what I was being so crazy and stubborn for. But wow, those girls from Jerain are the best in the world.
Medea stepped in.
Then please, do someone else a big favor. Smash lost his son. He just wants to hear a Gotham lullaby to honor his little boy. Before the end. Can you understand that? Can you please help a father mourn properly?
The piano player's smile faltered, and it was obvious he was getting emotional just thinking about it. He wiped a tear away.
Sure. I can't believe I was being so awful. The poor man. Tell him I'm sorry, okay?
With great care, surprising for a man who was so deeply into his cups, his fingers gently danced over the keys. The melody was slow, and sounded exactly like a child's music box. Somehow, in the context of this scene, it sounded less soothing and gentle, and was instead deeply somber and almost apologetic. As soon as the first two notes were played, Smash looked up from the table, tears welling up in his eyes. Quietly, Chesney walked over to the table and sat down. He wordlessly moved to hold Smash's hand, which he took. Medea joined them. She also wanted to offer whatever comfort she could, but her instincts told her that this was really only something the two of them could relate to in a meaningful way, and she wouldn't interfere. No one can judge the sounds of mourning of a father. They can only endure, and pray that they never find themselves understanding that pain. All Medea could think of was how her father must have felt, letting her go on this journey, and how he would react if he found out she burned to death, trapped in this cavern. I miss you, Dad. I'm so sorry for all the times I made you worry. At last he spoke, but in whispers only to himself.
Oh, Jorel, I'm so sorry. Your papa is such a fool. You're probably looking down at me right now, telling me to not give up. I want to see you again so badly, but I can wait. You let your mama look after you until then, okay?
Smash let go of Chesney's hand, and slammed his hands down onto the table, and loudly growled out the last of his rage. Then, he abruptly stood.
Kids, I'm sorry. I almost let my grief destroy this whole town. And you in it. Jorel would be so ashamed. But no more. We can save this town, I promise. Will you join me?
Chesney stood, and nodded.
You don't even need to ask. Right, Midia?
She wiped the last of the welling tears away, stood, and grinned.
Right. Why? Let's do this.
As they walked back to the trash chute, Midia looked around the bar and saw all the sadness that had filled the place like poison, now tempered by barest hope. Janine and Danette gave them firm, trusting smiles, and thumbs up. She nodded and returned the gesture. I promise, we will do it. We will be in time. The Bartoner leveled a look at Smash.
You watch out for those kids, you hear? With my life. They never deserved any of this. And, sorry about all the glasses.
The bartender laughed.
Tell you what, you get the mine back open. I'll call it even.
Once they were below, Smash confidently led them back along the path they had taken.
I take it you know where you're going?
Chesney asked, jogging to keep up.
Yep, been thinking about it this whole time, really. It all started with the first tunnel, where Jorel. Well, anyway, once it was breached, the main chamber of the cavern should have filled up almost immediately. What's been saving us this whole time is the rest of the tunnels. They've been filling with magma, taking the load, and as more tunnels filled, so did Hagudo. But they must be all full now. But if we can collapse the first breach, that should put a stop to it.
Midia chimed in breathlessly, having a harder time keeping up.
But then, won't the magma still be a problem?
Smash shook his head.
No. There's still tons of huge caverns ready to take the load, but they just can't drain this fast enough. Once the main source is cut off, this will all drain away.
They passed the bridge, and went down the other path that they hadn't taken. Around the corner, two more slimy creatures slid out of the shadows, making Midia's heart skip a beat.
Oh no, not these things again.
She trembled uncontrollably, remembering the savage way one of them had bitten and tore at her arm.
Argh! Out of my way, you punks!
Smash said, grabbing something from his belt, and throwing it at the pair of creatures. Right then, he grabbed both Midia and Chesney and dove to the ground. In the next moment, a pressure wave knocked them all back, as an explosion evaporated the creatures.
What was that?
She asked. Smash picked the children as easily as if they were made of paper.
Heh. I'd be a pretty poor foreman and miner if I didn't have a healthy supply of bombs.
He looked proud.
Those guys sure are nasty,
Chesney said, shouting, seemingly without realizing it. The explosion must have gotten to Chesney more.
Ugh, don't worry, he'll be fine in a minute. Let us hurry. If you say so,
Midia said, wishing they had the time to stop so she could look him over properly.
I'm glad you know where you're going. I was worried we'd be lost in these tunnels for hours.
Smash led them to another set of bridges up and down in what seemed to be a huge network of them. Then, past one large pool of magma after another. At last they stood beside a hole in the cavern wall that was spewing a strong geyser of magma into the lake below. She wasn't exactly sure how this all connected together, but Smash seemed very confident, so she put her trust in him. The heat was intense, and Midia and Chesney couldn't have approached even had they wanted to.
Okay. You kids stay here. I'm going to blow the tunnel.
Smash shouted, pulling out a bottle that looked remarkably similar to the ones they both had at their belts, and approaching the geyser without fear. The pair of them caught looks at each other as they both eyed the mysterious bottle. Like a master, Smash tossed bomb after bomb into seemingly random little nooks all along the rim of the great hole, and when all was in place, tossed the rest directly into the rushing magma, causing a massive chain of explosions. Smash began to laugh like a maniac, but Chesney and Medea had dove to the ground at the first sign of danger and couldn't properly see what was going on. In moments, though, the hot, killer air of the cavern noticeably cooled. It was still hot, dangerous, and oppressive, but the difference was strong. Looking up, they found Smash looking proud and inspecting a large pile of rocks where the geyser had been.
Ah ha ha, I've still got it.
He walked over to the two and once again picked them up like paper dolls.
That should take care of it. Let's get out of here.
The air was definitely quieter. There was still a whooshing, burbling sound, coming from some difficult-to-place direction. Chesney insisted, loudly, they hurry back to the bar to check on the magma level, and so they did. Climbing out of the darkness, they found the bar much as they left it, with the remaining people of Hagudo crammed in shoulder to shoulder, glancing nervously about and nursing a few drinks. Seeing them, Danette asked,
Did you do it?
Chesney put on a neutral expression.
Let's go see.
Chesney, Medea, Smash, and the two sisters surrounded the door out of the bar.
Oh, I'm so nervous, Janine said, whirling her hair nervously.
Smash guffawed.
Ah, trust me, I know my trade.
He pushed the door open. Everyone winced in anticipation of a wall of magma. They found the great red magma lake bubbling and churning, only now, it was being drained away before their eyes. Danette exploded in happiness, leaping and grabbing her sister, shouting her joy. The pair shared a tender moment of laughter and tears, having escaped a terrible death. At that, the rest of the bar followed suit and came pouring out of the bar. Many rubbed their puffy, drunken eyes as if they could not believe. Others fell to the ground and wept in happiness. Chesney looked like he was fighting his emotions, like he was overwhelmed, but unwilling to show it. At least not now. He closed his eyes and whispering to himself, though Medea could hear.
I did it. Tail. Samza. Gig. Got. I made it through another day. I'm one step closer.
As for Medea, she looked at the spot right close to the edge where she had collapsed and lost herself. Would I still be there, now, if Chesney hadn't made me move? Hadn't tried everything to find a way to save us? Would I have simply given up and let the fire take me? She shook her head. I don't have the luxury to be so weak. No longer. I will stand strong, no matter what it costs me. No matter what, I will not falter again. No matter what, I will protect you, Chesney. As though he could hear her thoughts, he looked at her then. As though he could see into her soul and see the workings of it, he studied her face and frowned. In the blink of an eye, she made her face be what it needed to be. She smiled, and hugged him, and said something silly, or stupid, and fun. He smiled too, and he squeezed her, tight. Chesney watched Medea reconstruct her face and do her best to pretend that everything was okay. You can't fool a fooler, Medea. All the others, the angry voices, were gone now. When the way out had shut, they were there, arms reaching from the magma, empty eyes in the bubbling, churning mess, calling, begging, demanding. He'd almost done it. But then he looked at Medea, and there was Samza, telling him he needed to try. And so, he did. She's cracking up. Big time, buddy. Tail's voice seemed to say, just over his shoulder. I know. I'll fix it. I'll protect her, no matter what. I promise.